In a world where the biggest RPGs are hardly role-playing games at all, it's always fantastic to play a game that actually has the elements of its genre. It's a bit like eating nothing but McDonald's for a year, living with nothing but liquid shits, and stumbling upon a nice old grandmother who takes you in and cooks you homemade meals and lets you return to the glorious world of solid shits. I'm blowing this way out of proportion, but it's basically how I felt when playing Divinity Original Sin 2. The important thing to take away from the anecdote is that it's a very solid RPG. Not perfect, but it's obvious that Larian Studios look at this game and think, we need to inject love and fix any problems that we had with the first game. And the most impressive aspect of the game itself is that they actually do this fairly well. Divinity Original Sin 2, like its predecessor, is just a very well-rounded RPG with a shitload of different playstyles, a variety of different skills and abilities, and a lot of role-playing elements for each character, and even the characters that you create yourself. You can set their backstories, which lends to the role-playing nature of the game. Even in single-player, it's such a robust game that you will come away from it with your own unique situations and memories and stories. The combat is the biggest focus of the game. It's a very fun, strategic, and very satisfying combat which rewards caution and planning. For instance, if you go into a fight and you lost poorly, the game will prompt you to attack from different angles or try to flank, go with high ground. There is also a big emphasis on loot in the game. There's a pretty broad loot system. If you like mid-maxing, then it's definitely the kind of game that you would enjoy, because there's a lot of looking at green and red arrows. That could be a pro or con for some people. It depends on your inclination. And co-op is another immense part of this game. It's very interesting as well, to say the least. The co-op is a significant portion of the game, although it can be equally as enjoyable in single player. The experience feels like a game that's designed for single player, but works tremendously well as a multiplayer game. There is clearly a lot of effort put into the loot, skills, dialogue, stories, prompting the player to pay attention to these elements. However, a lot of these get forgotten, especially in the case of story and dialogue, when you introduce a multiplayer element, because people are obviously going to be more interested in the pure gameplay than listening to the story. However, the game has so much meat to it, essentially, that even without the story element and the dialogue that is going to be a lot more missed, the combat, the decisions, the variety of ways to play the game makes it more engaging and fun in multiplayer. Although the sheer length of the game may challenge the patience of people and their friends that want to play through the entire game, I don't envision myself ever going through all about 110 hours of this game with anybody, because it's just such a commitment. That being said, it's an awesome experience and it can be so fun, especially with mods. The music is a very difficult aspect for me to comment on, because enjoyment of music is pretty subjective, even more so when it comes to things like video games and their soundtracks. Although I know one thing about the Divinity Original Sin 2 soundtrack, and that's that I enjoyed it. It felt appropriate, and Larian Studios obviously cared about this element of the game. It's pretty evident in the way that they give you the choice during character creation to pronounce certain instruments in pieces of non-diegetic music. Speaking of character creation, I think the studio behind this game went above and beyond with the amount of races in this RPG. In games like Skyrim, you can choose a member of a bunch of different races, but they're all fairly similar except for cosmetic and stat-based changes. But in Divinity Original Sin 2, there are, for lack of a better term, a lot of cool and very intricate differences between the races. Dwarves can fit into small spaces, undead or unaffected by death fog and healed by poison. Elves can eat body parts to witness the memories of previous owners of the body part. It really makes playing as a human a very boring option. Thankfully, even if you have an attachment to role-playing your own undead, non-elven self, you can recruit members of other races as companions. Additionally, depending on your race, you'll start with different abilities, with the addition of choosing backgrounds for characters, and story-playable protagonists have their own backgrounds. This is a really strong role-playing element of the game. And something that is definitely a huge improvement over the previous game, and I can see will give Divinity Original Sin 2 a much longer lifespan, is the ability to choose your companion's class when you recruit them. While this does somewhat diminish the connection between their personalities and their abilities and the story somewhat, it is so damn handy and will add so much longevity to the game and quality of life, just because it is so nice to be able to min-max your team and still have certain characters because they have cool stories. So now I'll go over my issues with the game, and there's very few because this is my game of the year and I rank it very highly because I found it very fun, worth 110 hours. It's just a fantastic game. So my biggest issue is a similar issue that the first Divinity Original Sin had, that being that towards the latter half of the game, the combat really started to drag, and I think this is mostly due to the fact that you don't get many skills late game. They start getting provided a lot slower towards levels about 10 to 16, and then from level 16 onwards you won't get any new skills and they stop being introduced. So this kind of makes the last third of the game a bit slower because the game is so combat oriented. It makes it drag on a bit and become slightly stale. Otherwise, if you mix it up enough, I think you can keep enough freshness in the game to keep you going towards the end. Although despite that, and despite the fact that I thought the game felt a bit slow towards the end, I thought the very end of the story, possibly the boss fight at the end, were a bit rushed. That's just mostly the writing, it felt like. And also the other con I would have for this game would be that if you don't like RPGs, and especially isometric CRPGs, you probably won't like this game because it very much belongs to its genre. So if you're a fan of RPG light games like Fallout 4, this might not be for you, but I still definitely recommend the game because being an enthusiast of RPGs and playing the first game really got me into turn-based combat and isometric CRPGs, and the second game is much better than the first game. So hopefully some people will be introduced to some new concepts with this game if you decide to pick it up. I cannot recommend it more. So thanks for watching. Goodbye.